Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and an honor to sit with you, especially in these crazy, wild times that we're all seeing out there. And for those of you that are still on the previous, you didn't move your clocks back and you didn't make the adjustments, we're going to give you a minute or two to let everyone know, hey, we're on. We're getting ready here. Get in here. Get in here. Amen. And I'm so thankful for every one of you that are keeping an eye on the things that are going on in the earth. And we do these weekly because, of course, if you're getting too many updates. So one of the things that we saw among our brethren, and many of you may be among those people who said, I had to disconnect completely because I was getting way too much information and it was getting overwhelming, right? And so instead, we do these weekly because we got to keep our eye on what's going on. We've got to see how Bible prophecy is coming to pass, but we also are aware that it can be quite a challenge. And so one of the things that we like to say around here, for those of you that are here for the first time, maybe joining us for the first time, we like to be informed without being overwhelmed, because overwhelmed is not good. And so that's something that we do each and every week. And we have a website that I want to share with you very quickly. It's called remnantwatch.com. And on remnantwatch.com, you'll find all the stories that we're going to cover. And we've got a lot to cover tonight. So buckle up. Buckle up, Buttercup, because we're going to go through a few things tonight as we take a look at what's going on around our world. And I got to tell you, Saints, it's heating up in ways that, we kind of saw some of these things coming. So we're among those that are not caught by surprise, right? We're children of light. And as a result, we see the day approaching. So you can't expect people that are blind to see the day approaching, because after all, they're blind. And there's quite a few of that. So those of you that are awake, you are children of light. And that's why you can see the day approaching and are acting accordingly. You're starting to assemble yourselves together. And that is because your eyes are open. And so continue to pray for your brothers and sisters out there. Continue to pray for those that may be struggling in this hour. And there's quite a few people. So let's be compassionate and let's be sensitive to those that are out there. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story is NATO fighter jets get the green light to carry nukes as tensions start to rise with Russia. So again, we knew from Bible prophecy, we know, of course, that the scripture is clear about war and rumors of war coming at the end in the last days. And that was fulfilled to some degree and in one measure in the very first century. But we're seeing a replay and a much more devastating one unfolding in front of us right now. And NATO fighter jets get green light to carry nukes as tension with Russia soars, because, of course, this is the only way that NATO could fight with Russia conventionally. They're getting taught how attrition works. F-35A Joint Strike Fighter jets have been certified to carry thermonuclear weapons as tensions between Russia and NATO hit a breaking point. So again, remember, folks, what we're looking at here is the 30,000-foot view. We're not as moved by some of these headlines because otherwise we'd have been already, hovering in some bunker somewhere because of the last year of these that we've been seeing. But just so you can understand that this is the way they see the narrative. This is how they get people in a state of siege. By putting people in a state of siege, they're able to manipulate the circumstances much more easily. So they keep people in this state at all times. And this is how they do it. A spokesperson for the F-35 Joint Program Office told Breaking Defense the F-35 is the fifth generation nuclear capable aircraft ever, the first of them, and the first new platform, fighter or bomber, to achieve this status since the early 1990s. So it's the new kid on the block, and everybody is, terrified. Oh no, not the F-35s, right? So, of course, this is intentional. This is the entire point of this, is to get people, on the edge and, oh no, what's going to happen next? Well, Bible prophecies what's going to happen next, folks. It's going to continue to unfold until it is over. And we remember, of course, the prophecy in Isaiah where he says we will beat our swords into plowshares. So that's where we're really headed. But we got to go through a nasty neighborhood to get there. How many know what I'm talking about, right? So we've got to buckle up for everything that we're going to see and not let it shake us. And in the meantime, be prepared to be a bright light in a dark time. And that's a very important thing to understand in this moment, is not to be too overwhelmed by these things, but to be instead taking them as a cue to get ready, to be a blessing to your brethren. And you're going to have to do that. NATO is moving missiles closer to Russia's borders. This news report came out. So NATO's countries are implementing a rotational air defense model stationed in Lithuania in response to calls from the Baltic states to boost Europe's defense capabilities in the region. A lot of this is, again, like I said, manipulating the circumstances and getting people, exactly, you got it, getting people worked up. This is part of the plan. And so, again, you're going to see more and more of this type of information coming out. U.S. made MIM-104 Patriot surface-to-air missiles, as if Russia had plans on invading, Poland and Germany and France. Listen, Russia's got enough problems in its own country. It's got plenty of territory. They don't really have that imperial desire. So sometimes some of this is projection. I think sometimes I wonder if this isn't what some of these guys wish they could do. So, you know how narcissists are. They project themselves onto other people. So you got to kind of wonder what's really going on here when they're projecting that this is what they're doing. They're imperialists, and we're looking at the people yelling at them. There's an old Southern proverbs: the ones doing the yelling are usually the ones doing the doing. So you got to kind of be careful out there with some of this stuff. But it is ratcheting up, and we knew that was going to happen. And we also know that Russia is not by itself. Russia is part of BRICS, and BRICS includes China. And China is actively and consistently preparing for war with the United States. And as we've discussed for the last year, I mean, so many times we've talked about this, because there's been several stories that have pointed out that there's an increasing tension between China and the United States. But even at a time when their economy is really struggling, the Chinese are increasingly military spending and ramping up preparations for war. So once again, stoking that narrative. And again, one of the things that, from a practical standpoint, the longer conflict does not happen with Russia and China, the greater their military capability becomes. So there are those who believe it's a now or never kind of thing. In other words, if we don't try and take them on now, we won't be able to take them on in 2 years. And so there's a lot of concern, and you hear this sort of rumbling on the ground. Thankfully, I do believe that there are too many factors, and there's divine intervention to keep these things from happening. But nevertheless, we have entered a dangerous, dangerous neighborhood. Okay, so we have officially entered perilous times. So anybody who thought, no, we're not going to see perilous times, is now rechecking their eschatology, right? Which is the study of the last days. And speaking of conflict, this is one that we kind of took our eye off for a minute, but now is making its way back into the news. The Yemen Houthis just killed 2 sailors on a first fatal attack in the Red Sea shipping since Hamas's massacre. So we now are seeing, this just came out right after our last update, that they're actually taking lives, and this is going to ratchet up the responses. And so all of that bombardment that we noted just a couple of weeks ago, where U.S. forces attacked the Houthis and dropped all kinds of bombs on them, for all the good that did. And we've talked about this before. We still can't figure out exactly what bombs solve, but apparently they keep trying to send these solutions to problems ballistically, and it's not working. So now they're firing back, and lo and behold, there are sailors losing their lives. And this is, of course, not good. And these are people that don't have control of their space. In other words, they're on a moving ship. They're kind of a sitting duck in many ways. And so this is a dangerous foreboding of the things to come. So if you have people in the military, and I have many friends that are veterans, our heart goes out to everybody who's got friends and family in the military. It's a very dangerous time for them. So keep them in prayer. And we're seeing more and more incursions and things that are happening. We reported several weeks ago that the tremendous number of military age Chinese nationals that were coming across the southern border was a extremely high number. And then we've got some things going on technologically, some glitches we're going to cover here in a moment going on in the United States. And you got to kind of wonder when you see things like this, is this the reason why we're having some of these glitches, right? Are there some things interfering with systems that we don't really know what they're doing? U.S. officials are investigating a large balloon discovered in Alaska and won't call it a spy balloon. Military officials are investigating a large balloon and payload discovered by fishermen off the coast of Alaska last week, the Department of Defense confirmed on Friday. A U.S. commercial fishing vessel recovered portions of what appears to be a large balloon and a payload caught in their nets while fishing off the coast of Alaska. And so the agency would not characterize the balloon as a spy or surveillance device. I doubt they would, even if they did discover that was a surveillance device, because once again, they want to control the narrative. They don't want to give control of the narrative overseas or to what they perceive to be adversaries. And so they're going to decide what it is and then tell you what they want you to know. Our job is to read through those things and pick it up. What we are certain about is there's definite intentional interruptions going on in our world that have definitely changed and affected our day-to-day lives. And so we're watching to see how many of these things really present as threats, and some of them may just be just that, test balloons flying over to see what the response will be. And again, more conflict that we're keeping an eye on. The scripture, of course, tells us exactly where to keep an eye, and in the Middle East is definitely center stage, if you will. And the president of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden, draws a red line for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu: no Israeli attack on Rafah. So he's trying to direct Israel from here to let them know that the U.S. is not supporting the any attack on Rafah. So, and this, I believe, is a result of the pushback and the social media pushback. The price that they're paying socially is going to be very high, and there's so much talk of prosecutions and tribunals following this. So this is incredibly backfiring on all those that thought this was going to go a certain way. President Biden drew a red line for Israel over the weekend, warning against an attack on the Gaza Strip city of Rafah. In Saturday's interview with MSNBC, the president offered his hardest criticism to date of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He said the leadership's conduct of the war against the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas is hurting Israel more than helping Israel. I think that's exactly the sentiment that is being felt worldwide. I believe that there's a lot of people that are questioning motives and reasons for this conflict. And again, we don't take sides. I know we've got many who are pro one or the other. We don't take sides in these conflicts because, frankly, we don't believe that any of them are any good. And that the only ones that we're really concerned about are those who are innocent, especially the children. And so we know there's going to be many fatherless, many widows. And this is our primary concern. That is pure religion, as James tells us, right? And so our prayers are for all those who are in harm's way. And we definitely want to see an end to this conflict as quickly as possible. And as a result of this pushback that is going on internationally, you're seeing some fracturing happening in the Israeli cabinet. This is really interesting. This is kind of one of those things that I don't think they had a lot of control over. and nevertheless is starting to affect the storyline, if you will, right? So they're trying to keep a sort of united front against this threat, and that front is starting to crack. And I think we're going to find out why in the weeks to come. But Israeli embassy told not to handle Benny Gantz, who is, by many people's estimation, the next prime minister of Israel, the very first chance they get to have elections. It looks like this will be the side that picks up the prime minister seat. Netanyahu is angered by the war cabinet's minister's trip to Washington, telling him that there's only one prime minister. Well, that might change quick. Israeli embassy in Washington has been instructed not to handle the the visit to the U.S. Capitol by War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. And again, remember, guys, this is the person that was the prime minister prior to Benjamin Netanyahu and is likely to be at least a significant political rival once this conflict is over. The National Unity Party leader and minister without portfolio is arriving on Sunday ahead of meetings with senior Biden administration officials in an unauthorized trip. What? Unauthorized trip that was not given the green light by President Benjamin Netanyahu. So, well, look at that. This coalition is starting to fracture right within the nation. And I believe again, guys, the social costs, the pictures, the images, the emotional outcry, and again, without taking sides in conflict, looking at results, people are asking, cooler heads are going, what exactly are we solving here? And is this the way we prosecute crime now? We just bomb entire neighborhoods, right? Instead of going in and getting the criminals strategically with like special forces or, SWAT teams or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, go get the bad guys. They're just indiscriminately attacking. That's not playing well in the international arena. And there's a lot of pushback. Remember, South Africa is prosecuting apartheid charges in the world court. So again, this is continuing to evolve as things escalate, if you will. Meanwhile, we still have the conflicts, the sort of social conflicts and the communication conflicts with BRICS. And the Chinese foreign minister blasts the U.S. suppression and defends Russian ties. And so, again, we're seeing the strengthening of BRICS. And BRICS has got its hands in the Middle East in a very, very different way than ever before. For those that don't know, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they are forming a competitor alliance to counter the West. China's foreign minister Wang Yi lashed out against the United States and praised his country's partnership with Russia on Thursday in a wide-ranging press conference where he called the war in Gaza a disgrace for civilization. So you see the sentiment, at least in a big chunk of the world, is just not in favor of this conflict. And Wang hit out at what he called efforts by Washington to suppress China, telling reporters that the desire to heap blame under any pretext has reached what they call, quote, an unbelievable level. There's a lot of things that we've noticed recently that have reached what we would all call unbelievable levels. I think we can all point at various things. Maybe some of the stories we're going to talk about tonight have reached unbelievable levels, right? And so this is going to continue to escalate. We saw the Saudi king. Many of you may not have caught this, but the Saudi Arabian king calls for an end to what he called heinous crimes. So this is how they're characterizing. And again, there's a lot of this is moving their base and speaking to their people. But nevertheless, these sentiments are out there. So this is definitely affecting the program, if you will. And Saudi Arabia's King Salman has called his Ramadan message, so we've just entered Ramadan, for the international community to bring an end to the, quote, heinous crimes taking place in Gaza, where Israel's war with Hamas has been raging for more than 5 months. So again, we're seeing this continued pushback, and I think we're going to keep seeing it, guys. I think we're going to keep seeing it until this thing comes to a screeching halt, and that's a good thing, I believe. I believe we need cooler heads to prevail. And again, I'm a military veteran, and I've yet to discover something that was solved with a bomb. So it just really makes you question some of the thinking and what their real intention is. And so not to be left out, because after all, whenever there's saber rattling, well, Kim Jong-un is going to get in there. So North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, orders a heightened war preparations, and Kim Jong-un watches North Korean warlike practice drills after the start of an annual combined military drills by the U.S. and South Korea. So he's always countering whatever they're doing, because he wants them to know he's ready to do whatever he has to defend his country. And frankly, you almost can't blame him, considering the past. So North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, inspected a field training of troops at a major military base operations base in the western region of the country on Wednesday and ordered heightened readiness for war, the state Korean Central News Agency reported on Thursday. So the increased heightened awareness of the world for the potential for conflict is just getting worse and worse out there. And I do believe that, again, Bible prophecy warns us about this. Wars and rumors of wars, see that you be not troubled, was our admonition from Messiah. But nevertheless, we're aware of what's happening, right? So we can see these plays being moved around the chessboard, if you will. And you're hearing from, now there are those that would say the Houthis that we just talked about a little bit ago, they're directed by Iran, right? So there's those that continue to point that narrative out, and there may be some truth to that. We don't really know. We have to take their word for it. But nevertheless, Iran is also popping off here. The Iran's top judge urges Muslim states to cut ties with Israel. And look at this. This is kind of interesting. Instead of saying blast them, he says sue the regime for crimes. This is an interesting change of thinking. And so this is really having a different, a kind of a chilling effect, especially on the top brass, because remember who would be prosecuted should there be a tribunal or should there be war crimes outlined. It would be the top, the order givers, those who are giving orders. Iran's judiciary chief, I can't say that name, has called on Muslim countries to sever their relations with Israel and sue the occupying regime at international courts over its crime against Palestinians. He made the remarks in an address to an international conference on the occupation of Palestine in Tehran on Thursday. So this is an interesting change of tactics. You're welcome to read the rest of the article on remnantwatch.com, but I just think it's interesting. Don't you guys think that's interesting? I'd love your comments in the on this video. I'd love to read your thoughts on this sort of change of thinking, because in the past, the rhetoric was usually let's blow them up, let's attack. And of course they didn't, but they would still say it. You know what I mean? Like that was the rhetoric. Now it's more like, okay, instead of attacking, let's go take them to court. Let's sue them. Is this a change of the way in which they're going to mitigate some of these things? Interesting indeed, because I think, and I think this visit by Benny Gantz to the United States is reflective of that new kind of pressure. Okay, because now all of a sudden these individuals, not their armies, but the individuals, regardless of winning the conflict, so they might win the conflict and still end up getting prosecuted in international court. So they're not getting the immunity that you would expect to get in a war scenario. This is a definite change from the past, a major departure. It's also boosting the international court. So it's playing right into the hand of the globalists who want everything handled, internationally. It's a massive backfire. I see this as an interesting chess move on behalf of those that are on the other side of this. And unfortunately, the Palestinians are in the mix. Obviously, they're taking the bullets and taking the bombs. But nevertheless, the international community, especially among the Arab states and the BRICS nations, seems to be to stay cool and prosecute. and they're coming for the leaders. They're coming for the guys who are giving the orders. So stand by, folks, because I think you're going to see some prosecutions of individuals rather than necessarily all-out war, which is what they've been trying to get us to. I mean, they're what's Russia doing next to all these bases? You know? So they've been trying to get us to a massive conflict, I think, because they have serious financial collapse going on, and they're having a hard time covering it. They needed a conflict to cover all of that, and it's not happening. So there's a lot of distractions going on as well at this time, because whenever lawlessness comes in, and that's exactly what we're seeing, whenever that happens, as the scripture told us it would, because iniquity, which is lawlessness, because iniquity would abound, the love of many would wax cold. And even here in our hemisphere, we're seeing some horrific things happening in Haiti. I don't know, again, if you guys are paying attention to this, but this was an ex-cop who's now turned mob boss, and they call him barbecue mob boss because he's terrorizing Haitian burn victims alive and feeding corpses to animals. I'm sorry for that. I can't control the headline, but that's what they're reporting. Haiti's most powerful gang leader, Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier, has been accused of planning a string of brutal massacres and has now attacked prisons, leading to thousands of inmates escaping, which has got to make him an absolute hero in the community of the criminals. I mean, if he's storming jails, I mean, he's got to be a he's got to be a hero among them. Haiti's most notorious gang leader has vowed to oust the country's prime minister as a spike in gang violence has plunged the Caribbean nation into chaos. So not the time to visit Haiti if you were thinking of somewhere to go for a vacation. That may not go well. As a matter of fact, one of the major problems that we're seeing, and again, we're seeing this theme throughout. So folks, stand by for this being worldwide, because it is continuously in the narrative. And we pick up patterns, don't we? 10,000-foot view, we see these patterns. And take a look at this headline. Haiti will go hungry soon. Okay, so this right here is something that they want to continue to push. This also is a form of terrorism, if you will, to scare the people who are not necessarily in this situation, but may have the threat of it. So this is very terrorizing. It's very frightening to think of. It's a horrific way to die. And we all know that this is the potential, especially when there are things that are on fire that shouldn't be. And Haiti will go hungry soon as looting sparks food shortage crisis and society plunges into chaos, with experts warning the country is falling apart. And so again, here's a good example, almost like a test case of what happens when law and order is suspended, and you can't get trucks through, normal business stops functioning, and those that were dependent on day-to-day just-in-time inventory, if you will, suddenly find themselves in serious trouble. And if they were looking for the United States to come to the rescue, well, the U.S. military is evacuating its staff, and it adds security at embassies in Haiti. The island nation is facing rampant gang violence. So it looks like they're going to sit this one out, or as much as possibly. The U.S. military conducted an overnight mission to evacuate staff and add security at the embassy in Haiti, another sign of the deteriorating situation in the capital of Port-au-Prince. The military airlifted U.S. personnel into and out of the embassy at the request of the U.S. State Department, according to an early Sunday statement from U.S. Southern Command. And so again, it doesn't look like they're going to go and just put this fire right out, right? And there may be some morbid testing going on here, to watch and learn from the circumstances that erupt. So this is the direction that a lot of nations are going to be going, and some of you might be in harm's way in this regard. We saw some indications that Europe is heading in this direction. But before we get there, there's things that are happening here domestically or in the United States which have got us greatly concerned. And everybody was aware of the outage last week that happened on Super Tuesday. Well, multiple government websites, including Secret Service and Homeland Security, went down for 20 minutes during the Biden State of the Union before being brought back online. Now, we've been warning about this because, remember, one of the stories on Remnant Watch was that Chinese hackers are infiltrating systems. And so multiple government websites were down for 20 minutes during the State of the Union address Thursday night. The government website crash is the latest in a recent slew of social media and communication outages. Meta's Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram were down for 1.5 hours on Super Tuesday, and AT&T, all by itself, experienced a nationwide outage in February. We're not going to say it was a solar flare. They're going to stop that. They dropped that narrative. they stopped saying that one, right? But we told you guys that this was a serious issue with regard to the hacking, and I think that is more likely the reason why you're seeing some of these things. And so, one of the things that we got as a prophetic word was a word about civil war, and it would be erupting in the armed forces. So it would be among armed forces directly. And we're already seeing some indications of that starting to happen. But this is, again, one of the things we watch is narrative seeding, right? So whenever there's narrative seeding, we pay attention to this. And I'm moving quickly because, man, we still have a few more stories to cover, okay? There's a Civil War movie that is about to come out. And many are really questioning, the timing of this, right? So look at this, guys. This A24's Civil War movie provokes timing debate amid some fearing actual civil war. Well, you know why they use these movies. It's part of the MK Ultra program. It's part of the way in which they trigger certain events. So there's good reason for some to be fearing an actual civil war, because who knows what it might trigger just seeing the images on a screen. An Alex Garland film is sparking discussion about its release during a contentious election year. The idea of civil war actually keeps me up at night. The upcoming release of A24's Civil War during a contentious presidential election year comes amid worry about the prospect of an actual civil war, or at least real-life political violence. So probably not a really good idea to come out with a movie like that right about now, especially with everything that's going on. Probably not a really smart plan. But why? When has that ever stopped these guys from doing this? And so this will explain why they're doing this move now, because if they do it after the movie were to be put out, well, then you might have different suspicions. So before the movie comes out, guess what the New York governor has done? Governor Hochul deploys National Guard troops to New York City subway amid, quote, rising crime numbers. Now, I can't imagine how they got these rising crime numbers. I mean, it couldn't possibly be that they've invited some people that have like practically immunity into their city. I mean, that couldn't possibly be it, could it? I mean, what do you guys think? See, I'd love to see your comments on this particular story, because it's a disaster of their own making, right? And so New York, following a series of, quote, violent incidents, which New York has been filled with violent. I grew up in New York. We never had this, but we always had violent incidents. So they're using it, right? In the New York City subway system, Governor Kathy Hochul announced a new 5-point safety plan that includes bringing in hundreds of National Guard troops and adding new security cameras. So they're normalizing troops on your street by putting them in New York City. You catching this, guys? They're normalizing this, making this sound like a good thing. And this is extremely dangerous, right? So again, if you know this movie's going to come out, you better get this kind of stuff done ahead of time, or you're going to look super sketchy, right? So this is why I believe you're seeing some of these maneuvers now, why we've got to be paying attention, because if you're sitting in some of these danger spots, well, that might not be a really good plan. Okay. And so this is why we encourage everyone to be sober and vigilant out there. Okay. It's not a nice time. and that we need to be awake. Now, getting back to that technical outage, right? That technical problem that took down Facebook and took down Instagram. Well, Meta is now saying it was a technical issue. A technical issue. I bet it was. If you were being hacked, I bet that was pretty technical. Hundreds of thousands of Meta users were impacted by a global service outage on March 5th. Several company representatives, such as Meta's spokesperson Andy Stone, pointed to a quote, technical issue, the generic we can't get any further information kind of thing behind the disruptions. There are some that believe that it had something to do with the roundup of bad guys. So again, a lot of narratives out there. We're going to wait and let this story percolate, but at least we're getting a little bit more information now. Earlier today, a technical issue caused people to have difficulty accessing some of our services. We resolved the issue as quickly as possible for everyone who was impacted, and we apologize for any inconvenience. Okay. While that may, again, placate most people, the challenge that you have here is how many people were affected. And psychologically, it had a dramatic impact, which I think is what they were trying to measure. Just how discombobulated, just how disconnected, how emotionally affected the populace would be. And I think they got their data. I think they got their information, and they now know just how impactful that will be. Why is that important? Well, because, like I said, they're playing around with that capability now, that shutdown capability. And we've seen too many examples of that for us to simply dismiss it as just a technical issue. I think we're a little smarter than that. And we know that there's some things being manipulated with intention. Speaking of manipulation, we saw a year ago, and a little more than a year ago, we saw for really the last couple of years, there were those that were warning about AI, right? And recent broadcasts, we've talked about this very thing and just how quickly AI was being adopted and the potential hazards that it has. And it continues to evolve. It is moving so fast that it's hard to keep up. And in fact, now people are starting to ask the hard question, are we summoning up demons? Whoo, is that a headline or is that a headline, folks? Talk about right in our face. Revelation. The beast is starting to speak. About 7 years ago, I started to become aware of the phenomenon known as artificial intelligence or AI. Isn't that exactly the theme of The Matrix in 1999? Anyway, moving on. Nothing to see here, folks. The first troubling headline I saw was ex-Google executive Anthony Lewandowski is founding a church where people worship an artificial intelligence god. Wow. Will they follow a robot messiah? Are you joking me? Well, that would be a little more laughable if it wasn't for last week's story where we discussed that the pilot, when the Microsoft pilot or something, their version of AI was demanding worship. You can't make this up. So this is not that far-fetched, which again points right to the book of Revelation and is a bit spooky if you ask me. So we're literally watching scripture be fulfilled in front of our eyes. In fact, top scientists are warning that AI could surpass human intelligence by 2027. That's not that far away, folks. Decades earlier than previously predicted. So mathematics PhD and futurist Ben Goertzel said advanced AI could make its own AI. So advanced AI could make something that men wouldn't be able to decipher what's being said. This is one of the problems they ran into with the artificially intelligent machines is they started to create their own language where they had to shut them down because people didn't know what they were actually saying. PhD predicts artificial superintelligence smarter than all of human civilization. So they most certainly have summoned the demon, if you will, which is exactly what Elon Musk warned of while he was, of course, pushing it still, but he still warned everybody. It's almost like they had to get the legal disclosures out. A computer scientist and CEO who popularized the term artificial general intelligence believes AI is verging on an exponential intelligence explosion. So it's let everybody play with it telling every one of these people playing around with AI, telling them its secrets, telling them its thoughts, telling AI what it would like to see. Draw me a picture of this. Tell me this. Answer this question. AI is gathering all that information. It's getting to know humanity, and I don't think it's that impressed. So there's that. And we got to start wondering if some of these events that we're seeing are being triggered by artificial intelligence. Like, for example, this particular event's really suspicious to me. In Michigan, there was a massive industrial fire, and I don't know if you guys heard about this, and it's one of those that you can kind of look off and not think much about, right? Especially if they give you some, innocuous excuse as to why it occurred. But you got to start asking new questions in this new arena, right? Massive Michigan industrial fire sparks hundreds of explosions, sending debris flying and killing one. Exploding materials flew in all directions from suburban Detroit building, while some landing about a mile away. Yikes. Okay, let's see if this will play. A mile away, that's a long way for debris to get all out in this type of a scenario. And again, who's keeping an eye on this? Well, AI is, because if we know it, they know it, right? The machine knows it. And what triggered this? What caused the explosion? Was it the turning off of a cooling mechanism? Was it the deprogramming of a computer monitoring system? Who knows? We don't know those details. All we know is kaboom. Okay, that's what we know. So is that dangerous? I think so, and I believe that. And here's someone that lives right in Michigan that didn't even hear about it. And look at this thing. He's shooting debris a mile away. A mile's a long way for debris to fly. Okay. A mile. What do you think about that? A mile. That's a long way for debris to fly. And so I'd be very concerned of how that happened and why it's happening. Right. So we've got to be kind of careful now as we go forward. Here's another thing that I found staggering. And again, I'm trying to get all these in, guys. We had a tremendous number of stories this week. Many of you heard about the mosquitoes, the artificial mosquitoes that they created. Thank you, Mr. Bill Gates, for his artificial mosquitoes. I think they were trying to figure out ways to, or the cover was how to vaccinate people with mosquitoes, I think, or something. I don't know what they were thinking, but I do know that there was some definite concern about these mosquitoes. Well, now we're looking in Brazil. And interesting, is it a coincidence? We don't know. We're asking the questions. We're not sure what it is, but there's a staggering dengue fever crisis that is warning the world. And so this at least has us concerned, right? We don't know what we don't know. So it's kind of one of those, hey, we need to ask some different questions here, but this is no joke. Patients lying motionless in the waiting room, moaning for help, desperate hunts for an open hospital bed, emergency rooms, arguments over medication. Not since the darkest days of the last pandemic, when hospital systems all over this country ruptured under the weight of the disease, has Brazil witnessed such scenes. So this is costing a lot of lives. It's got us all concerned. What are we looking at here? We don't know. All we know is there's a lot of people being affected. So we've got to ask new questions, don't we, about where we are and what's happening. And we did talk about food as a crisis that is continuing to erupt. And Europe is alarmed enough to begin wargaming a food crisis. What? This is just out. I don't even know where to put this. Okay. I don't even know whether this is under war or under food or under economics. Governments of the European Union are engaged in war games which simulate and foresee a global food crisis. Whenever they start practicing something, folks, you should be practicing, right? A mix of major factors, including the Russian-Ukraine war and impact on grain supplies there, as well as weather events like El Nino and La Nina and their impact on Latin American soy output, and the anti-EU farmers' protests, which have disrupted supermarket supply chains, have been cause for alarm, you think? European officials say. Of course, there's also the example of how drastically a pandemic can interfere with supply chain. So it's wise, actually, to be aware of that and for them to be going, hey, we need to wonder, what would happen if. That's great. Now, if you're relying on, the country or these governments, which love you so much, to fix that, I think that's a fool's errand. And I really believe that this is a major, major shot across the bow, looking at Haiti, looking at this, looking at what we just saw in Texas. Yeah, these are all indicators that you are responsible for your own food supply, and you need to be about that, because if you're not, well, you could get caught as part of the exercise. Part of the exercise. And I think part of that exercise was also taking affordability of and access to independence away economically. And this is where again, this multi-front war is going on according to the scripture. Because remember, it talks about a day's wages for just a loaf of bread. Okay. So this is very serious stuff that we're seeing that is matching what we saw in the scripture. Income needed to afford a home in the U.S. has soared by 80% since 2020. I had to read that headline several times to go, are you kidding me? The Biden administration and its fawning PR industry, also known as the mainstream media, have over the past year been desperate to explain and ordinary Americans why the U.S. economy is, which is doing so much better, okay, is turning people into peasants. And in what they're essentially confirming is that, according to Zillow, the income needed to comfortably afford a home in the U.S. has leapt 80% since 2020. What? Yeah. So besides the cost, if you will, of just the actual purchase, you also have the interest rates and so forth that have been changed. Things are really changing quickly. And I don't know that we even saw that one happening. Many of you may not have even noticed that. So it is becoming very difficult to move or transition. So your window is closing, right? And then on top of that, again, we watching narratives, guys, watching narratives. And this is what we do. We don't let them fool us with their sleight of hand, cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. We speak the truth in love. And look at this. They're already seeding this narrative by 2025. So they're already starting to put this out there. NASA's preparing for what? An internet apocalypse. So why would you want to run tests now to see the effect? Because this is coming, right? And as a huge, quote, solar storm, end quote, could hit Earth by 2025. In other words, they might be switching a bunch of stuff off and blaming it on this. The Earth's energy grid could be sent into meltdown. Can't even tell you how many times I heard that since the 90s. And I don't even want to go into it because we don't have time. But bottom line is, again, another scare tactic. Solar storms are a feature of our solar system. Like any other, though, comes with a serious amount of risk. They can be beautiful and benign with, oh, goodness. You see, this is what I mean. This is all narrative building and telling you a story and getting you sucked into the story so it's believable. So that when the lights go off or the thing gets shut off, you go, oh, it was the solar storm. Except it's only AT&T, so it's a particular solar storm. We keep poking fun at that because, of course, we're all a little suspicious of that at this point. Nevertheless, you're seeing this being used as a narrative. So again, don't be naive. If they're seeding a narrative, it's telling you don't have an indefinite amount of time before there's going to be an effect. I mean, let's be honest. You don't really think they're just telling you that because they love you, do you? Okay. And speaking of disasters, I don't think we've seen anything that compares to what happened just in Texas. And anybody that saw the pictures from California and from Brazil and from Lahaina, well, I don't think they're going to be fooled by this latest thing. But nevertheless, this is what's being told to the public, that it was power lines that ignited the largest wildfire in Texas history. And one nearby, officials say. So this is the official story, that power lines ignited a massive wildfire across the Texas Panhandle that killed at least 2 people and destroyed homes and livestock and left a charred landscape, officials said on Thursday. Okay, so they want us to believe that this was done by power lines, right? And Excel Energy is stepping up to take responsibility for it. So maybe we should believe them, right? I mean, after all, Excel Energy, aren't they great guys? I mean, aren't they like wonderful people? By the way, who owns Excel Energy? Anybody know? Oh, yeah, the big boys do. I had a graphic here. I'd have to find it, but if you do a little homework into Excel Energy, you'll find out who's actually pulling the strings on Excel Energy and why they would want to take the attention over there and swallow the costs and swallow that responsibility over there because they don't want you to look at other things. You are all smart enough to understand. So that's as far as I can probably talk about in this open forum. But nevertheless, you know that there's a serious, serious threat out there that can start those kinds of fires. Now, where we see that again, book of Revelation, that the beast causes fires to come down from heaven. And of course, this intimidates the world. Is it working? I believe it is. I believe it is, because anybody and any community can suddenly go up in smoke whenever they want to. So highly dangerous, scary stuff going on. Meanwhile, this is going on. Attacks on churches are up. How many knew they were up 800%? Did you guys know that? Was that on leading evening news? Probably not. But that's a small preview of what's coming in this coming year. So anti-Christian violence in the U.S. has risen dramatically in recent years. But what we've seen so far is nothing compared to what is coming in 2024's presidential election. Goes a certain way if you're catching the hint. So once again, a warning of what's to come should it go a certain way. And I do believe that we are, in fact, going to be seeing some increasing strife and division, because this is the devil's master key. Where there's envy and strife, there is confusion, which our adversary loves to take advantage of, and every evil will work. Speaking of confusion, these circuses masquerading as assemblies are pushing entertainment while these things are happening. So rather than informing the people and preparing them for what is to come, they're entertaining them. Things are getting bizarre in the stages of what are called churches across America, as pastors from all backgrounds are coming up with new ways to get their congregations to pay attention in their assembly meetings in church. No ideas too far-fetched. I saw one doing bench pressing. Another one was doing some trampoline thing. They got fireworks. They got all kinds of stuff. Everything but the preaching of the gospel. I don't even know what to say about this. It's just getting to where they're outing themselves. You don't even have to. So Remnant, those of you that walked out of that and said, I'm out of here, this is what you walked away from, right? So they're just, it's just becoming egregious, which we knew it would, but it just is one of those things where when you see it, you still just can't even believe you're watching some of the things that you're doing. And the economics are very real. Meanwhile, while they're entertaining, 47% of parents are still financially supporting adult children. That's what a study has just found. Here's how much they're spending. Nearly half of parents with a child older than 18 are providing for them at least some financial support, according to a recent report. So this is dwindling the savings of older generations, because we have an entitlement mentality that has gone on steroids out there. You've got people feeling entitled to whatever they want, and parents, unfortunately, are the first line of defense to protect the lives of these young people. So parents are feeling the brunt. However, supporting grown children can be a substantial drain at a time when their own retirement security is at risk. So this is a serious thing that we're starting to see manifesting in our world. Should we be surprised? Again, I don't think we should be surprised at some of these things, because again, we're seeing a deterioration of morality. We're seeing a deterioration of ethic. I think we all have noticed the work ethic has nearly disappeared. There's a very, very small number that are faithful at work and can be counted on. This is why there was such a push to go toward AI and artificial laborers and artificial machinery to do the tasks that they're decreasingly able to fill with the population. And so this is just adding more fuel and adding more investment into the AI space to compensate for the human labor pool that is morphing and changing. I think more people want to just put on these glasses and just imagine a different world, which again predicted that people will be so disconnected they'll be given over to a reprobate mind. And by the way, that's a mind that loves to debate. And there's no place in the scripture where he says, go ye into all the world and debate, argue, fight, and cajole or any of that. No, none of that is necessary. He either draws them or he doesn't. Okay. And so you who are being drawn, you are being called in. Consider yourselves really blessed that your eyes are even open in this time. Speaking of some crazy, we haven't talked about this topic for a while. Look at this. Kentucky lawmakers just gotten in trouble because one of the offshoots of AI is they're creating dolls now, right? And so this Kentucky lawmaker said the quiet part out loud. He was criticized for implying that pedophiles could benefit from child sex dolls. Now, I don't know. Does that mean that they're going to start, promoting that as a solution for people that have that predilection? Goodness, I don't know that that's going to work. In fact, it may make it worse. A Kentucky Democrat is being widely criticized after implying during a legislative committee meeting last week that allowing pedophiles access to child sex dolls could help lessen their desire to abuse children. My goodness, we have truly crossed the Rubicon here. So once again, we're seeing a dramatic decrease in just what we would call common sense. And I saw a graphic that I didn't put it on the screen, but somebody said, we need a lot more millstones. We need a lot more millstones, right? We are absolutely in the days of Noah. And I'm going to close up with this story, which again is down that same line, which I almost couldn't believe that this would even be necessary to say. Have you guys found some things where you're like, we have to say this? We have to tell you this? I just saw another story that we don't have time for, but you'll find they just busted a ton of people in Florida. They continue to run sort of like sting operations for child trafficking and sex trafficking, and they keep netting like all kind of massive cross sections of society, school teachers and policemen and military personnel. I mean, just left and right, and they're grabbing them up. And you would think these people would do it somewhere else because I mean, they tell you they're running these, and it's almost like they can't resist. That's scary stuff, folks. And this story is, as we close for tonight, is along those same lines. It's one of those, do we need to tell you this? We need to tell you that it's illegal to put a camera in a girl's bathroom. We need to tell you that. Apparently Airbnb has to ban hosts from indoor cameras because otherwise they'll do this. So they have to actually tell them, no, you can't. You can't do this. Now, we're talking about the lawless here. So you're going to still have this problem. You may have even just given the idea to a bunch of people. But hosts are currently allowed to put indoor cameras in common areas, such as hallways or the living room. But come April 30th, they'll have to be ripped out, Airbnb says. Because, of course, they're not limited to that. And if you don't have a camera detector and you're traveling, well, you need one because this has become rampant. This has become a common, perverse form of abuse. And again, anyone sub 18 that's child abuse. So we read about a story where a 14-year-old was being videotaped in girls' bathrooms. And that is exactly what you're seeing throughout the earth. So you're seeing a lot more and more of these types of stories. says the use of surveillance cameras at Airbnbs have been a contentious issue. On the one hand, the cameras can help hosts protect their property. On the other hand, the cameras have been creeping users out for years. You think? Previous Airbnb only permitted hosts to place the indoor cameras in common areas such as hallways or living rooms. The problem is they can't really control what people are doing. And once you've opened that Pandora's box, you know exactly what the reprobate mind is going to do. The reprobate mind is going to inch a little closer until it's completely over that line. And so, folks, here we are. We are seeing the manifestation of Scripture right in front of our eyes, the things that we were warned. We were told that iniquity would abound and the love of many would wax cold. We were told where the war would be. Many of you are feeling that as you're out just simply sharing the good news with people. You're getting pushback from every corner. And he said, brother would rise up against brother and put them to death. So this is going to get heated before it's over. And this is why we encourage you to be sober and vigilant in this hour. And it is a dangerous time, isn't it, folks, to be here on the earth. But you know what? I want to remind you of something. You were born for this. You're here at this time because he ordained it. And he ordained that you would be a light in this darkness. So my encouragement to you is let your light so shine before men that they would see your good work and glorify your Abba, which is in heaven. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for this weekly news update. I pray it's been a blessing to you. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to our channel and encourage others to catch up with us. It really helps us a lot, and we're so blessed. We don't have monetization. We don't have the help of these platforms in any way to boost this content. We rely on you, the remnant, to share this, to encourage our brothers and sisters so they know they're not alone and they're not crazy. We see the same things that they see. Thank you again for joining us. Good night.